This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he is every episode, I've kind of forgotten his name. Can you tell us who you are again?
Hello, my name is Robb Reinhold. I'm a guy. That's it.
Yeah, it's been a while. We haven't seen you all in probably months. You know, Robb was on vacation. I had some things going on. And we both knew that the only episode we had left over is episode 100, which is going to be the very last episode of the Trading Psychology Podcast. I don't want to hear or see any tears in the comments. We've been away for 3 months and nobody said anything. So this is just really kind of putting a bow on everything. And also, you know, Robb, we've given everybody pretty much everything. You know, I said this when my Forex trading material ended. I pretty much left it all out on the field, and so did we. There's pretty much not a subject we didn't cover.
Well, I agree. And maybe this episode is more just for us to tie a bow around what we've done over the past couple of years. And I've told you many times, I'm so proud of this podcast. This is what every trader needs. And when you get into trading, and I'm the same way, back in the 90s when I got into trading, I didn't think about any of this stuff. And this is the stuff that matters. And we've been able to go into so many wonderful, really niche areas and talk about really specific things and talk about solutions. I'm just so proud of it. So it's sad that it's going to end, but I couldn't be more proud of what we've done.
And do you remember the early conversations we had around the podcast? This was not initially going to be a trading psychology podcast, but we talked about a few different things we could go over. And then I'm like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? We are probably if you take everybody in the entire world, probably in the top 5 of people who really value trading psychology over anything else. And we should probably do something with that because, you know, we might not get the clicks and the views that, you know, maybe a technical analysis podcast or whatever podcast would give us. But there is nothing out there that moves the needle more than trading psychology, and absolutely nobody is approaching it. And when they do, they're way too broad, and then they just kind of leave it there and walk away. You know, nobody really gets into the heart of the matter. I felt like my book did, but, you know, I wrote it 5-6 years ago, and it was just me. I didn't have anybody else to bounce ideas off of because I didn't feel like there was really anybody there. But I'm like, oh, crap. No, Robb is right up there. This is exactly what we should be doing.
Well, when you say get to the heart of the matter, trading psychology, really before we started talking about different ways, was really about be more disciplined, don't be an idiot. And we've all tried that. And that's really what our very first, I think, 5 episodes were all about, is about how you, how me, how all of us are flawed, tremendously flawed, and how there's some of these flaws that you literally cannot change because it's so deep in your DNA. And then how do you succeed in spite of that? No one's talking about that. Everyone's talking about be more disciplined, have more rules, take a journal. All these things are great advice, but none of it gets to the heart of, hey, you have chemicals in your brain that's making you insane. You don't know it right now, but it's happening.
Yeah, and I think that was a good place to start. I'm all for going broad to narrow, and you kind of have to deal with the macro before you deal with the micro. And so I think we did a very good job of that. For anybody who goes back and listens to some of those early episodes, I would first like to apologize for the sound quality. For some reason, I'm really bad at this, and it took me forever to get even some semblance of good sound quality with 2 people talking. Now it's easy. I just ask AI what to do, and it tells me. I'm like, oh, crap. That's so obvious. And I haven't been doing any of that this entire time. So I thank all of you for being patient with me there. And I hope we at least got it kind of close here. But for this episode, I didn't really even know what to say or do. Thankfully, Robb does. And he put out a nice little outline. And so I looked at it, Robb. I like it. I say we just follow it. And then we'll kind of riff towards the end. And that'll be it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And what I really wanted to do with this last episode is really kind of do a bird's eye picture of the 99 episodes that we did and really what it was all about and the flow of taking someone who is from A all the way to Z, someone who is brand new and doesn't even know that they are flawed, and then take them all the way through the end to where they are this hardened, and I'm using the term hardened because I love the quote that we have at Maverick Trading, is that traders aren't born, traders are forged. Traders go through fire, they go through heat, they go through pressure. That's what forging is, and that metal comes out a lot harder in the end. And that's the process of trading psychology, is you go through this forging process, and it's very difficult. There's some pain involved, there's some tears involved with some of us, but at the end, you come out a much better trader. But I'm going to throw in even something more grandiose, a much better person. And that's what I really wanted this episode to be about, is that let's start from the beginning of a brand new trader and let's get all the way to the end of a person that is fully developed, not only their trading system, but full understanding of who they are as a person.
Yeah, and I can echo that. I think anybody who's been through this long enough and who's actually made it past a certain point in their career can echo the same thing. Again, I struggle sometimes to think maybe it's just overall maturity, but I know a lot of people my age that just never really came out of that rough patch. It's just sometimes you come in and you just don't come out the other side, and it's unfortunate. But I do think through trading, I mean, God, there's so few things in my life that really bother me. And if anything concerning comes up, I always know, okay, the first thing I need to do is take a step back and look at it. I cannot be reactive like I was in my 20s. It's the cause of every problem anyone has ever had, emotion and reacting way too quickly. So that helped me tremendously. And I also became something called outcome independent. Like, no matter what happens in my life, I don't let it affect me a whole lot, because chances are, one, it's temporary. Two, if it's not, it's just something I have to go through to get better later on, down the road. There is no point in reacting to it in any sort of strong way. I mean, yeah, if a family member dies, okay. But again, that's going to happen to you. I don't know if I'm putting this together the way I should, but for me, do you kind of understand the whole outcome independence thing? It was a concept I really didn't hear about until later. And I looked back and I'm like, that's kind of my approach to life right now. And I really have trading to thank for that.
Well, that is absolutely in my outline for this session, so I definitely understand it. And I love what you said at first, was that now when something happens, the first thing you do is step back. And we talk a lot about self-awareness in all of our 99 podcasts we've done. And self-awareness only comes once you've totally come to terms with, I suck. And I did a speech at a Traders Expo one time, and I actually got up, and I've told the story before on this podcast, but I'm going to tell it again. I got up, and my speech was, this is how I started. Hey, everybody, welcome. We have this great trading expo here. We have all these businesses that are here with software. We have all these companies that are here, brokerages that can run your trades. But I have to tell you, none of it's going to work because you suck. And I paused for like a painfully long, 5 seconds. And the faces of everyone in that audience was just like, what? I'm like, you suck. And then I started to basically say, hello, my name is Robb Reinhold. I suck too. I'm an overtrader. My biggest losses always come after my biggest wins because I'm overconfident. All those things. And I talked about, really spilled my guts about all of my flaws and about all the things I didn't do well and all the mistakes I kept making. And that's really the process to get better. Before that process, you are a slave to, number one, the programming you received as a child. And we talk about that, I think, in episode, it's either episode 1 or 2. We talk about the programming you received as a child and the programming you received as a new trader. The first books you read absolutely programmed you to think a certain way. Because if you would have read a different book, you would have thought a different way. All of that programming that you carry into your start as a trader, some of it's going to be helpful and some of it's going to be hurtful. And you have to step back, as you said, and look at, say, oh my gosh, some of this programming I received as a child or some of the books that I've read actually set me up to have this exact failure point over and over and over again. So I want to say our first episode was about programming, about how you really have to step back and look and see your programming sets you up to succeed and fail at trading. Keep the good stuff. What's the stuff that didn't do well? I mean, that was a long time ago. And when you said that you now use AI, I remember thinking, when we started this podcast, AI wasn't really a thing that people could use. That's crazy.
Yeah, and even now, it's far from perfect. It draws from sources just like Google does, and sometimes those sources aren't correct. It's getting there. We know that. I'm certainly
It's not AI, it's Google Plus. I've always said it's Google Plus.
Yeah, and if anybody remembers Google Plus, we apologize for making that correlation because that was a thing and it was really bad. But yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. And it can do a lot of things that just plebes like us don't even realize. But that's another topic. I do want to steal that "you suck," pause 5 seconds bit for any speech I ever make in the future. That was incredible. Because, yeah, I already come off as a pompous ass anyway to a lot of people who don't know me and aren't familiar with me. So that will really, really take them over the top. I like that. But, yeah, those early episodes were great, too, because we did talk about programming. You have to understand why you think the way you do. And nobody wants to sit there and say, yeah, I'm super programmed. Or yeah, propaganda works on me because I'm an idiot. That's not really how it goes down. Like, it works on everybody. I've said before that, the world does not even teach us to be risk tolerant. They have done nothing but teach us to be risk averse our entire lives. Unless you just had those aggro parents, which maybe that's 4 or 5% of you. They taught you to play it safe. School absolutely taught you to play it safe. I can't think of one time where school actually taught me to take a risk. The only time they ever talked about risk is when risk goes badly. So your whole life, you had to step through that curtain and come out the other side of just the risk curve, just the risk spectrum. And now once you've done that, chances are you didn't step through it gently. You probably ran through that sucker. And now you're just ready to take way too much. And here comes Forex trading, who fosters that urge more than anything I've ever seen. This was before crypto trading. Crypto is probably worse, I would imagine. But yeah, the whole world just sets you up to fall right on your face, which I guess could be a good thing. But, what if you got a different set of material early in the game? What maybe could that do to your overall career? I do wonder that sometimes.
And how great is it that I've actually met some young traders that the first thing they're getting into is trading psychology. And I was like, yes, we did it. We finally did it. As a trading community as a whole, is like, hey, before you start learning about the charts, why don't you start learning about trading psychology? So it's just such a big deal. And one of my favorite authors, his name is T. Harv Eker. He has a whole program about feelings lead to thoughts, thoughts lead to actions. And he actually says it's actually more than that. There's programming leads to feelings. Feelings lead to thoughts. Thoughts lead to action. And he said to change this cycle, you have to change that programming. That programming is going to control and set you up for your feelings. And look, if you ask me, one of the things I love about myself is that I don't have lots of feelings. I've never jumped up and down because a sports team won. I've never pumped my fist in the air. Like, I've never done that stuff because I don't feel it. And so I've always been very happy about that. But I've also been very jealous that I don't feel as deeply as other people. But all of us feel regardless of how stone cold we think we are. And those feelings are chemicals. They're just chemicals in your brain and your body. And there's another great book, I've referenced this before, it's called The Hour Between Wolf and Dog. And it was a trader who wanted to know what happens in your body when you take risks. So he went back to get his neurology or neuroscience degree or something. And he talks about how your stomach sends signals to your brain. And then your brain sends chemicals, and then you take action based on that. And so it's so complex because everything that's in your life right now, how much sleep you got, the food you ate, the past trades you made, what's going on in your personal life. Is your dating life good? Is it bad? How's your marriage? All of that stuff is wrapped up in this decision making, and you don't think it is. You don't think that your marriage or your relationship with your mom and dad or whatever it is affecting your trading. That's a lie. It all affects your trading, and if you aren't even aware of that, how can you possibly survive?
So 100 episodes in, I'm still learning things, Rob. And the first one is that people actually start with trading psychology. It's almost really hard to believe because that is the least fun topic of all time. And technical analysis to me, and I think a lot of you out there, is probably the most fun topic of all time, or at least top 3, top 5. I just think it takes a lot to start with the mud instead of the honey. Like that's
It's only happened once or twice, so
okay.
I'm not saying we've broken ground here, but it's happened.
That is kind of broken ground. That's something. That's more than I would have ever thought. And two, I always tell people that I'm just this heartless robot, made of wood. But you sat there and said you never get excited over anything. Sure, even I get excited over some things. Like if Ohio State covers the spread, and I win my $50 bet, I'm going to jump up and down. I'm going to yell. Like that is a human reaction that will come out of my mouth. And it's funny too if I'm around people who are around me normally, or maybe I'm dating a girl that doesn't know me that well, and they see that, they're very surprised. They're like, "Oh my God, the robot actually, did a non-robot thing." So, yeah, I'm maybe a little disappointed to hear that. I feel like we should have, joy and anger and pain in our lives. Maybe you do, and you just react to it different because, like you've been trading. You and I are only a few years apart, but you've been trading twice as long as I have. Maybe that's just what I have to look forward to later in life. Who knows?
So I've actually been working on it. As we're talking about trading psychology, like I want to feel stuff like that. And so one of the sayings I've come up with is how much something matters to you is directly proportional to how much time and effort and money you've put into it. My son has always loved cars from day one. I don't. I have cars bring me no joy. Fast cars, whatever. But he's always been into cars. So when he was 13 years old, we bought a drift car together to go drift racing. And this car would break down all the time, and I hated it. And I learned how to fix a car, and I hate working on a car. I can't tell you, one of my things in life that I just do not enjoy is car repair. But when you're out at the track and something breaks and you want to get back on the track, get your hands dirty and you break your knuckles on things and you get it working. My son moved away years later when he was 18, and I kept drifting for years. And I realized I love this now. I love this. And it's because I put time and effort and money into it. And so now as I'm trying to not be that robot, I'm trying to feel more. I'm getting into things and I know that I'm not going to feel it at first. Because I'm so jealous of the people that I'm taking up tennis. They take up tennis and they're like, from day one, I just knew tennis was for me. Day one, I thought tennis was stupid. But I've been doing it more and more. And now it's like I'm competing and it's now starting to grow. So no, I'm working on becoming less of a robot myself.
Okay, good. Good to hear. Yeah, I didn't want to have an impending doom for my future coming up because you and me are more alike than people probably realize. But I'm looking at the outline, Rob, and I see self-awareness coming up. And this is really important to me because I'll get some pushback sometimes. And people say, well, if you're such a solutions-focused guy, why not just tell me what to do? Why not just tell me how to fix this? Why do we have to spend so much time pointing out the problem? I'm like, well, because you have to identify these faults first before you can fix them. And the problem is, 9 times out of 10, we don't even realize these things apply to us. Or, because most traders are men, our egos are so big that we just don't feel like they apply to us. We know they're there. We know other people have problems with it, but it couldn't be us. So we have to dot that I and cross that T first before we actually read the word on the page. And so I'm glad you kind of feel the same way here too. And this is something we're going to be talking about earlier in this episode than later, because I think that's where it goes. You have to start with this.
My first couple years of trading, and you got to remember, this is back in the 90s. Back in the late 90s, it was very old and stodgy. Wall Street was like, hey, it's only for people with money. Like everyone had brokers, and online trading just barely got started where, hey, you can do it yourself. And Wall Street was like, you can't do it yourself. You need a broker. You need an expert. You need a mutual fund. And the first couple of years when people asked me what I did, I was a little bit not embarrassed about it, but didn't really love to say, well, I'm a trader. And then the next question I would always get is, wasn't that just like gambling? And I would get very defensive. And I'd be like, no, it's not like gambling. It's different, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, like, as I got a little older, I realized that's a lie. It is gambling. It is literally gambling. It's literally gambling. And I realized that once I admitted that, I then started to see, oh my gosh, I see people with gambling issues. Am I a degenerate gambler? And I took a look at my over trading and thought, oh my gosh, I'm that junkie. I'm that junkie on the slot machine, at 1 a.m. in the morning, still pulling because they can't stop. And once I was finally honest that yes, it is gambling, I was able to look at some of my behaviors kind of with disgust and say, ugh, I don't really like that, because I look at that person, that quote degenerate gambler, and I look at that person like it's not me. Once I finally admitted it was me, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to change this. I don't want to be that person. So the biggest thing again with self-awareness is just to be 100% honest. And it's stuff that you don't want to admit. And I realized that I was the trader that would take their account down to zero if I got in a bad enough situation. And once I realized that, I'm like, I've got a family. I literally can't do that. But I'm that guy. I'm that guy that I look down on with disgust at the blackjack table. That's me. And I don't want to be that. That's how brutally honest you have to get with yourself before you can make any changes whatsoever.
Yeah, and the hard part is you have this vision in your head of what it's going to be and what that lifestyle is going to be like. For me, 15 years in Vegas, you don't have to tell me about gambling, but before I moved down, I had this thought to where, okay, I'm going to have this particular lifestyle. And because I'm in Vegas and casinos are right there, casinos are going to be a part of that. And I'm going to live that life that I see, in the movies, just a poorer man's version of it. And you realize right away what type of man you do not want to become by spending time in Vegas. I mean, I would work with people because, I was a waiter. It's a cash business to where you would have, on a good night, $300-400 in your pocket. You'd have to walk to your car, but you had to walk through the casino with cash in your hand. For some people, that's a real problem. And there is not one, I can't think of one restaurant I ever worked at where there was not at least one compulsive, degenerate gambler there. Often there were multiple. And so not only did I see the very low end of it, to where I would see drug addicts in there, playing the slot machine, playing nickel slots. I would see it with my friends, close up in real time. And I was like, man, something's got to change. And you got to understand this whole thing is rigged against you. And well, at least the casino industry is. Now, when people come up to me and ask me about Forex trading, they're like, I don't know, it kind of seems like gambling to me. My first thought is, I shouldn't even respond to this person, because if they're already thinking like this, they're probably never even going to get started. But I tell them the same thing I tell you, Rob. I'm like, yeah, in a sense it is. But unlike Vegas, for example, you could put the odds in your favor if you wanted to. Now, some people can do that in the casino too, but they will still screw it up because they're drinking or because of emotions or whatever the case is. Vegas knows exactly how to use these things against you. The odds are already against you. God forbid you put the odds in your favor. They'll either kick you out or they'll just wait for you to self-destruct, one or the other. So when you see that firsthand, up close, you have a decision to make. Say, hey, do I just want to let it in and just explode like a firework in this place like I see in the movies? Or do I actually want to be the picks and shovels guy who takes advantage of all this bad decision making for myself? Thankfully, I picked the latter.
Let me tell you how I now answer that question. When people say, well, isn't trading like gambling? I say, Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But here is where the difference is. What I do is, like, when I go to gamble, I like to play poker because poker has actual odds that I can win. The house isn't involved in the poker game. I'm now playing against other people. So I've selected a place to go. And you know when I like to play poker the most is Friday and Saturday nights. Why? Because people are drunk. So I like to find it where the drunk tourists go. I like to sit on a table against them, and I'm pretty confident I can take their money. Do you see how much different that is than just sitting down at a slot machine and pulling a lever to see if you won or not? This is cold and calculated. And as a trader, that's how you have to do it. You have to go in and find out where's your edge. Because if you just sit down at the casino, you have no edge. You have to figure out where your edge is. And like I said, in the casino, I find my edge on a poker table on Friday and Saturday nights where the tourists go.
I'll take the other side of that one. I haven't done that this episode yet, but man, I did play Hold'em for a few years. I was probably break even to decent at it. But sitting at a table with drunks and antisocial people in a captive audience type situation just drove me absolutely crazy. I'm like, there's got to be a better way. I don't care if I am making a little bit of money here and there. This just isn't it. So I had to get out of that atmosphere. But I know what you're saying. Yeah, you find the wrinkles where you can take advantage of something and then you go for it. You go full bore. You quadruple down. That's really the only way. You know, Vegas is not the best example because it's really hard to do. Like I said, I stopped poker. I stopped everything except for sports betting because I did have, or what I felt like I had, and mathematically, if I go back, you know, I am up. I have an edge in certain sports and certain ways to bet those certain sports. And I am pretty terrible at everything else. So what I learned from that crowd too is you don't just bet because you want action on the game. You bet where you have an advantage, and then you just keep doing that. And you don't fall for any of the sportsbooks' little tricks like live betting or parlays or anything like that. And you just stay with it, and you do that over and over and over again. And wouldn't you know, that's the exact same thing you do in trading.
Patrick, I just remembered one of the episodes that we did was on fantasy football and how fantasy football and trading are similar. And I told a story about a guy that worked in an office with all these sports nuts, all these guys that knew everything about every player. And this guy was just a data scientist guy. He didn't even know like Pittsburgh had a team. He just didn't care. But he just crunched the data and he crushed everyone. That's how you got to play the game of trading. Is you're not in there betting on your favorite teams. You don't even need to know the CEO. Who cares? Everything's a ticker. Everything's a chart. And if you can just find the data, find your edge, and be disciplined, then that's how you win this game. So everything you said, totally true.
Yeah, one way to know who's not a pro is if they're sitting in the sports book watching the game. Yeah, because pros don't watch games. Pros understand markets, not sports. That was tough to learn. I'm like, well, I feel like if I watch sports and I kind of know what's happening, you know, I at least know more than these lines makers do. You actually don't. It actually works against you. And it's been good here because, you know, living in Mexico, I can't get most of these games unless I pay for it, and I don't really want to sit down and do that. I would rather do other things. So it's kind of sad. Like, my love for sports is kind of slowly going away, but it does stay alive in the betting markets, and I'm so much better of a sportsbook player now than I probably was before because I not only don't I watch games, I simply can't. So yeah, it's and I tell people too, you don't need to know the pound sterling inside and out. That's complete nonsense. That is not going to help you. If anything, it's going to screw you up because you're going to be way too into news that either doesn't affect you at all or is probably going to work against you when you're trying to make a trade. Your knowledge of that particular currency really has no net benefit. Just like you say, Rob, trade the market in front of you. Do nothing else.
Let me go back to my saying that I said, how much something matters to you is directly proportional with how much time and effort and money you put into it. If you have been reading about the British pound, if you've spent the last 4 hours reading about the Bank of England and what the governors are saying, you have almost no chance to do your bias, to get out of your bias, because you've spent a lot of time and effort to learning about this pound. You're going to start saying stuff like, Rob, I only trade the pound because I understand the pound. People tell me that, and I just look at them like, oh my gosh, like, you still don't get it. And again, I know I'm going to be ruffling some feathers here with some of your listeners and my listeners, but I don't care because it's what they need to hear. I hear people say like, oh, I only trade pound yen. Like, that's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, you don't know pound yen. It's silly, but you've convinced yourself that you have some sort of great insight into this. It's a ticker. It goes up and down based on supply and demand. And that's where, again, everything we've been talking about fits right within my outline, because the next thing is systems over discipline. Once you focus on the system, once you focus on the edge itself, you get away from knowing about the quarterbacks on the team. Just like you talked about with your sports gambling. Once it's no longer about the game itself, it's about the odds, you treat this totally different. Like, you will make a sports bet, not because you think that one team is going to win, but you think the line is too low. And so you'll make a bet based on the line. Hey, I don't think this is a big enough line. I'm going to take this bet. It's not about even who's going to win or who's going to lose. It's just about, hey, I think the odds make some sense here. Once you create a system, then all of a sudden you are trading the right way.
Yeah, people have been a bit surprised in the past that I don't have this like super deep knowledge about certain currencies or who the Fed governor is and things like that. I normally do know who the Fed governor is or the chairman in these certain currencies, only because they're on my trading calendar. That's the only reason I know who they are. Because there's really, I hate to say it nowadays, there's only one Fed chair that matters, and that's going to be in the U.S., which is nice because that's all I have to worry about, and I still don't even worry about that guy too much. Again, this goes back to when you first started trading. All of the things you think you have to know and all the things you think you have to be good at, most of them were wrong. Your Flat Earth Trading Society, Rob, was the perfect example of this. I've told so many people about this. That if you had the most basic money management system in there. I mean, maybe not basic to a beginner, but it was basic to me. And all you did was just like completely kept yourself out of the trade and just let it do what it was supposed to do. You only got 40% winners and still outdid the average of the S&P 500 by what I thought was kind of under trading and just putting a really basic money management system in place. And then you flipped coins, you threw darts, and you rolled dice. And there it was. Yeah, there was no news aptitude in sight. There was no back knowledge of currencies to even be had in this experiment. And I guess people have a hard time dealing with this because they probably got so excited about knowing these things, and then they do, and they like it, and they feel like they're really, really plugged into the market, just like your guy who only trades pound yen. They have this telekinesis. They just know how that market moves, which is so funny when I hear people say that to me also. But yeah, it's none of those things. And so that's why when people complain that I don't get straight to the solution, I'm like, guys, we not only need to identify these problems, we have to get all the garbage out of your head first, because there is so much in there.
Yeah, and that is the next step, is reprogramming. And I've got to just say, Patrick, your channel, and I've read through a lot of the comments on your channel, and that you were very early into the game of Forex, where you basically said, you need an algorithm. And you said that from day one. And this was like, you were one of the first people I heard talk about, hey, you need to build a system. And one of the things I love to rephrase terms, because I know it's semantics, but the words you say in your brain will set you up for failure. And this is where reprogramming really helps out. I have conversations with traders that, Rob, I know it's going to bounce here at support. I know it's going to bounce. And I'm like, okay, you cannot say that. Because when you say that, those words, I know you know that there's a possibility it doesn't bounce. I know you know that. But what you're doing is you're setting up your brain with this absolute, this black and white. and you no longer have the freedom to even give your brain the ability to think about what if it doesn't bounce. You've now closed that off in your brain. And so reprogramming everything you do, very important. One of my favorite things that traders can do to reprogram is that you're not a trader, you're a builder of trading systems. And Patrick, like I said, you were so early onto this game online, and that has been your whole entire message. I would love to have people no longer call themselves traders, but hey, I'm a builder of trading systems. Think about how powerful that would be if that's what you thought trading was when you got into it, rather than clicking buttons.
So two things here, and I'll circle it back around to something you said that I thought was amazing. So it's funny you mentioned algorithms and algorithmic trading, because when I was starting my channel, I was also looking for, like anybody who's building their channel, it's smart to see, okay, what terms and phrases are people looking for? And make videos about that so you can relevantly put it in your title and your description, things like that. Just basic, Google and YouTube SEO. And I looked up algorithmic trading, and I was like, God, maybe I can really lean on this because that's what I need these people to understand. And it only got like 800 searches a month on Google. So I'm like, no, I'll mention it, but I'm not going to lean on it, right? Fast forward to right now, as we're shooting this podcast in 2026, I just turned on my keywords everywhere tool and typed in algorithmic trading. 49,500 searches a month now. So I'm not sure how much of that had to do with me, probably not a whole lot, but the world has caught on. This is the way. Now, the other thing I want to say about that is the problem is even when we put this together, and even when we have back tested it and we see how well it works, and then even if we forward tested it on demo and we see how much it works there, all of a sudden, when it goes live, we now all of a sudden don't trust it, especially if it gives us a loss or two, or maybe 3 or 4 in a row. And now all of a sudden, we feel like we know more than the algorithm does. Well, to quote the great Robb Reinhold, my response to that would be, what do you think I'm about to say, Rob?
You don't know shit.
Ding. Let's continue with that.
No, and that's exactly right. So, going back through the whole evolution of trading, you start off as a trader, you read some books, you go to some websites, and you dabble a little bit in it. And then you finally become what I call a pro, where it's like, hey, I'm going to design a system. I'm going to design a repeatable system that I could do. And then you've spent all this time developing the system. This is where, again, you get tested. And your system doesn't get tested, you get tested. And a lot of the things we talked about in our podcast series was what to do in these specific situations. What to do when you take 5 losses in a row. What do you do when you take 5 wins in a row? Like, what are the risks here of you screwing it up? And the reprogramming that we like, it's I know it's semantics, but it's really powerful in your brain. We did I think we did like 3 or 4 episodes. We had one called Systems Over Discipline, but it basically talked about redefining success in trading as not outcome dependent, which is exactly what you said in the beginning of this podcast. And you change it to system dependent. Did you follow your system? That all of a sudden is success. And that's such a big thing that you need to just reframe in your mind of what success means.
So just for clarification, it was systems over goals, which I like a lot better. Systems over discipline makes it sound like discipline doesn't matter. Discipline is kind of everything, but goals are a problem. A goal, and we outlined it really well in that episode, Rob. We said, look, if you're aiming for this type of ROI every year, you're making a really, really big mistake. Stop doing what literally everybody does and measure success in ROI. Instead, measure success in how well you were able to stick to your system. And everybody's like, what? Well, no, that's exactly it. And the way we do that is through the journal. More importantly, more particularly actually, is the comment section. Every time you make a mistake, you have to own it and you have to put it in the comments section. And then you look back, and Robb, you had a really good, we got a lot of great feedback off of when you said, hey, measure it by every 25 trades. Because you can't really do month by month because some months are faster and slower than other months are. So maybe that's not the greatest barometer. But every 25 trades is. Go back in your journal, look and see how many comments you had in the comments section. Are the number of those comments going up or down, or are they staying the same? You want down, obviously, but that is how you measure your success as a trader. I think that's one of the most profound things that you and I kind of came up with together, because I challenge anybody to argue against us on that point, because that's really it. That is the entire game. It's just most people cannot see it that way.
After that episode, I want to say that episode had the most comments where I really felt like we just changed someone's life. And now look, I don't want to get too grandiose. We changed their life, but we changed their trading outcome and trajectory by, hey, don't focus on any trades, focus on blocks. Trade in blocks where, hey, I'm not even going to look at results until I get 20 trades. Once I get to look at 20 trades, I'm going to look at that block. All of a sudden, the individual trade becomes much less intense. Like, if you're saying, hey, I'm not even going to look at my win-loss and profit factor or anything until 20 trades, that seventh trade, you're like, okay, I'm just going to do my thing and I'll check it after 20 trades and see if it works. That took so much pressure off people. And like I said, the comments after that episode, I really feel like we changed people's outcome in trading just by that one rule. So I am very happy about that.
Yeah, really looking back on it, since this is our last episode, if we had to kind of say, what was your one crowning achievement? It might be that right there, because that's something that I think you and I both knew. We just didn't really know how to articulate. And then we just kind of came together in that episode, and it was just kind of serendipity. It just kind of came out. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's how I meant to say it this whole time. Okay, so you do this. Yes, that was really kind of, I think that was a light bulb moment for both of us. And then we combined the light bulbs, and it became a light bulb moment for everybody. So yeah, I'm glad, because that wasn't on that was on your outline, but I didn't even think about it for a second. Like, okay, what's the most kind of profound thing we really came up with during the course of the last few years of doing this podcast? That was really it, I think. I agree.
This all comes back to the process, focusing more on the process than the outcome. You talked about living your life as, what was it, outcome independent?
Independent, yeah.
This is exactly that. You're focused on the system. You're focused on you. And once you do this, let me tell you what happens. You create this wonderful positive feedback loop. And we had a whole episode about feedback loops, about how when you're trying to make behavior change, and I'm going to go back to being an alcoholic, because I think that's one of the most difficult things that I've seen people that I know and love go through is breaking that cycle. And how hey, I've been sober for 3 months, and to get all this positive feedback, they're losing weight. They're sleeping better. They feel better about themselves. People are telling them, man, you look great. What's going on? All of that stuff makes it easier to follow your rules in the future. And so again, redefining trading success as I'm going to follow my system. And then you get these positive feedback loops. And then you also reward yourself. I think we had an episode about rewarding yourself. Set little things like, hey, if I follow my rules to the T for the next 25 times, I'm gonna take myself on a little trip, or I'm gonna go to that steak dinner that I've always wanted. Reward yourself. It's all this mental stuff that we do that sounds a little silly, but it's the stuff that changes your behavior. And that's what this whole thing has been about, is being self-aware of your behavior and looking at the destructive things, figuring out why you did those things, and then trying to figure out a way other than discipline to fix those things. And then once you get that positive feedback loop going, it is so much easier. And then that leads to consistency, which is the goal of every trader. And not just the goal, but the holy grail. Patrick, you and I have both found the holy grail of trading many times. I found it in call ratio back spreads once. I found it in, earnings reports once. I mean, I found so many times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I found it. I just have to do this. And then I'm going to be a millionaire. And then it worked for a little bit and then it fizzled out. The true holy grail of trading is consistency.
Yeah, you do that thing, especially in the indicator world, where you find that indicator and then you go on MT4 and you take the crossbar or the crosshair and then you click where you would have entered the trade and you drag it all the way up to the very, 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 very tip top. And you're like, I would have made 500 pips right here if I had just used this indicator. So yeah, I found those little holy grails over and over many, many, many times. And I was wrong every time. Even when you put algos together, it's not always the holy grail because you can always do better. But at least you have something. And just like you showed in a Flat Earth Trading Society, if you just have something, something very crude and almost ridiculous in some ways, if you just stick with it, that's all you really have to do. And like you were mentioning just a little bit ago, that can be really hard if you have like a chemical dependency or something like that. And so that kind of is the first thing you need to fix. And that's not going to be an easy sell to a lot of people. But, you and I both live very clean. We're very disciplined, but we also don't have jobs. So we can't really afford to sit around and get high. Like, we have to be motivated and we have to focus. And I've had people tell me, well, I learn a lot better. I learn your material a lot better when I'm high. I'm like, well, I have ADD. I would learn material a lot better if I was on Ritalin. But it's not in my best interest to keep that type of dependency for particular tasks. You need to kind of learn how to break that over time. And you can do that. You sometimes just have to restructure the way you learn things. But when it comes to actual trading, if you can't trade, if you haven't had a few beers in you, or if you're high, that's complete nonsense because there's not even a whole lot of focus involved. You just follow a system. You click a few buttons, and then you walk away from your screen. It's that easy. But you're going to have all these other problems in the background, like Robb talks about with sleep and stress and everything like that, if you still have these chemicals floating around your brain. Do your best to phase those out over time, because it's one of those rare things to where it kind of doesn't matter what else we're talking about if you can't fix that first. I hate to make this sound like a PSA, but I felt like we haven't talked about that in a while, Robb, and I felt like it kind of needed to be said. How do you feel?
Becoming a true, profitable professional trader, it doesn't happen. There's not a switch that's flipped. Like, hey, on May 7th of 2008, I became a professional trader. Like, that doesn't happen. What happens is you start making less mistakes. And I talk to all of our traders at Maverick all the time and say, look, you're still going to make mistakes. Your job is, instead of making a mistake a week, is to only make a mistake a month. And give yourself some grace, because nobody can go from, hey, I'm an overtrader, to trading the right amount of time all the time. It doesn't work like that. That's not how behavior change works. If you're an overtrader, you're going to have to work and work and work. And success for you might be, I was only a dipshit twice this week, when last week you were a dipshit 5 times. And then it's a process where you are changing and growing and getting better. And I've always said this, and I'm going to repeat this. It takes 3 to 6 months to learn enough about trading to, quote, be successful. It takes 3 to 7 years to truly become seasoned enough to where you can make money at this consistently. And again, consistency is the holy grail of trading. And I remember when I got to that point, and this is so crazy, but I got to this point and I was sad, because I got into trading because I'm an adrenaline junkie. I used to love to jump off cliffs skiing. I used to love to do flips. I love the thrill. The thing that attracted me to trading was the thrill of trading. And I remember having this moment where I realized I no longer have the compunction. Like, I'm no longer compelled to deviate. and to get that rush and to get that quick money and to get that whatever's happening. And I remember thinking, well, I want that. I want that. I had to admit, like, hey, you're a junkie. Like, you are a junkie. And I remember there was this moment where I knew that if I closed the door on that, I could never go back. And it was a really weird moment. Just think about how weird that is in the world of trading, like to mourn the loss of that spontaneous, overtrading, zealous Robb who had monster gains and then monster losses. Man, that was living. And I was sad that I was going to lose that. But consistency matters more, and I don't regret it at all.
Yeah, this goes back to when I talked about moving to Vegas for the first time. I thought it'd be a very thrilling lifestyle compared to my life, back in the Midwest. But I got there and I realized, and I'm glad I realized this. It took me a couple years, but I said, I would rather have the money instead of the thrill. The thrills are great, but at the end of the day, I just want the money. And I get mad when it's taken away from me because somebody smarter than I was took it from me. And that's what happens in casinos. That's what happens in a lot of aspects of life. You just have to decide, am I cool with that? I'm definitely not cool with that. That makes me really mad. You took my money away from me because you got one over on me and you're smarter than me. That on the street, that would probably cause a reaction. But in life, it happens all the time if you allow it to, in exchange for a thrill. A thrill, by the way, which you can get elsewhere. You can get thrills in a lot of places. It doesn't have to involve, losing money over time. So that was my approach. I'm glad I figured it out. I think it was just me looking around with disgust at your average person I would see in a casino, and just having that epiphany. I'm like, man, if I just keep going this route, I could end up that way. That's really, really scary. I would feel the same when I saw those, 50, 60-year-old waiters in a restaurant, who were slow and just not good at anything anymore, and obviously not very happy. And I was like, man, that's the path I'm on, and this can't be. Something has to change. Now, what needs to change? That always takes a bit of time to figure out, and that's where I think material like this really, really helps, Rob, because a lot of people don't have like accountability partners in their lives. I don't, because I live alone. So I kind of feel like for a while there, we were kind of the surrogate for that. Because if you don't have anybody to bounce feedback off of, well, at least listen to the sound of our voice. We will tell you the right and wrong way to go because we have lived both sides, just like you probably will. You're just on the wrong side right now.
And I love what you talked about replacing the stimulus. You can get thrills lots of different places. And we've talked about that in several of our episodes. I remember one on overtrading, where I'm a big extrovert. I love the dopamine rush. And I realized I was using the market to get that dopamine rush. And with that dopamine rush comes all the negative things that happen, and how I needed to get my stimulus elsewhere. And I just told a story where I realized I've lost one of my favorite stimuluses, which was screen watching. Oh my God, I love screen watching. It was so fun to screen watch. And I finally just was disgusted with screen watching. I'm like, you couldn't pay me money to watch this 3-minute chart or 1-minute chart now. I realized that I've replaced that stimulus. And again, these are all the methods that we've talked about over our 99 episodes to get you to the point where you are consistent. And I'm going to wrap this up with saying that is the holy grail. If you're looking at what does it mean when I've made it as a trader? How do I know that I've made it as a trader? Consistency. That's the holy grail. That's what you're aiming for. That is your ultimate goal. The money is simply a byproduct of that. And I'll tell you right now, the money is going to come in waves. And the waves are going to be the most difficult thing. If it was a steady paycheck in trading, where you made $500 every week, there would be no psychological problems. But when it's 1 week you make $3,000, the next week you lose $1,500. The next week you make $10,000. The next week you lose $3,000. Like, that messes with you. That's why all these psychological problems come up, because that messes with you. Oh my gosh, I can't even think about having a regular paycheck. I dream of that. Oh my gosh, that's heaven to me. Have a regular paycheck. Now, yes, I'm not willing to do what it takes to get a regular paycheck. That's why I chose the market. But consistency is your ultimate goal. If there's anything I can leave with you guys after 100 episodes, is that is your ultimate goal. That's what you should be shooting for.
Yeah, I'm not the greatest YouTuber. I'm not the greatest businessman. But the biggest reason I am successful in those two things is because 95% of my competition quits. And there's not a whole lot of people left standing. And so the few that are get the benefits of all the spoils. I'll listen to other podcasts and I'm like, God, there's so many people out there that just speak way better than I do. They're so natural at this. I don't feel like I necessarily am. I may sound like I am, but there is a lot of editing involved. And I say a lot, and I double speak my words a lot. I'm not natural, but I just kind of keep going, because you and I both have that background, Rob. Not just trading, but waiting tables. Waiting tables in Vegas is the most inconsistent income you'll ever have. You might make $1,000 one night, and then the next week you won't even get called into work because there's no conferences in town, and you just don't have the seniority. And it's like it's so inconsistent. You're afraid to spend any money you make, and that's how trading is. And that's why I've always told people, have other sources of income. Never rely on trading. There might come a time, 8-10 years down the road, where you're making enough money to where you can actually pay bills with it and do what you want. But for the longest time, it's not going to be that way, even if you think it is. And the psychological hit it's going to take if you're relying on trading to pay the bills, my God, and you have kids depending on you, terrible, terrible idea. So I guess my two takeaways there, and I know we're getting close to the end here. I might just end with these two things, is have other sources of income and just stay consistent. Let your competition slowly fall off little by little by little every single day. I know as traders we don't really have competition, but you understand what I'm saying. Just stay the course and make sure you're always getting better. We have shown you how to do that. If you just do that, kind of doesn't really even matter what system you're running. Run a good system, of course. Every little percentage point counts. But get this part right first, and it would be really, really hard to fail.
And especially if you've reframed your definition of success to, I've followed my system. It's going to be really hard to fail, basically impossible to fail. And look, depending on what system you made, that might be a little bit of money, that might be a lot of money. But I'll tell you this, if you can crack this code, you get to apply this to every single thing in your life. And I'll tell you what, you're going to succeed in the gym. You're going to succeed in a marriage. You're going to succeed in everything you do because you've cracked the code. And that's why I said in the very beginning of this episode, it's going to make you a better trader, but I guarantee you it's going to change your life because you have cracked the code. It can be applied to every single thing in your life, and you will win at everything you do. Not because you're the best, not because you're the smartest, but because you're the most consistent. And you work at it. And you understand how to fix mistakes and fix problems. As I said earlier, this will change your life. Not just your trading life, but your life. So throw yourself into it. Systems over goals or systems over disciplines. You will win in the end.
And so on those notes, I suppose I would just like to wish everybody well. The whole point of doing this, really, we didn't make a whole lot of money off this, I'll tell you that, was to really just have these episodes
Wait,
here.
You've made some money off this?
You've seen what YouTube pays, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Gone are those days. But we now have, we really kind of left a legacy here, Rob, I think. We have this whole, I hate to call it a buffet because I don't like when people pick a little here, pick a little there. I think it's almost like a holistic course. But if you're beyond all that, You can now go in. Anything that might be troubling you, we probably have an episode for that. And I've seen our downloads. We get so many more downloads here than I do my other podcasts because this podcast is evergreen. Has been built to help you now and 20 years into the future. So I hope we've created a nice little time capsule here, Robb. And I just, towards the end here, I just want to thank you, Robb, for being a part of this. You actually came to me. And I'm glad you did. And I just want to say, too, that, when I think back to 2014, when I first joined Maverick, there's just this rush of excitement. And we just have so much reverence for you and the staff there. And 12 years later, 2026, I can speak for myself personally. I still got a bit of that for you. I still have that respect and admiration for you that I did even back then. It's very unique. I don't have that for many other people, but it's never gone away.
Well, thank you very much. And again, I'm so impressed with what you've put together. And, I read through the comments. I don't have a ton of time to spend on YouTube, but I read through the comments of a lot of your videos. And I just love that you are, and again, I don't want to get grandiose changing lives. That's too big, but you are truly helping. And you're helping this, and it's free. It's absolutely free what you're giving people. And I just think it's awesome. So great job.
So on behalf of Robb Reinhold and VP, thank you for joining us through 100 episodes of the Trading Psychology Podcast. Robb and I will see you in another universe. Take us out, Robb.
Goodbye, everybody.